Hypersensitivity. The defense mechanism of our body provides protection against pathogens and recognizes self and non-self antigen. But sometimes the defense mechanism can cause damage instead of providing protection. This condition occurs when the immune system overreacts to certain foreign antigens or when mechanisms of self-tolerance fail. Hyper is derived from Greek term hyper, which means over, beyond, or above, and sensitivity means the ability to detect and respond to slight changes or signals. Hypersensitivity is defined as any immune response that is excessively above normal. It is an inappropriate immune response that results in the host damage. These reactions are manifested when the individual gets second or subsequent exposure to the antigen. Hypersensitivity reactions can be grouped into four types. This classification is based on the type of hypersensitivity reaction. Type 1 hypersensitivity is also known as immediate hypersensitivity. Since it occurs immediately upon exposure to antigen, it takes only seconds to minutes to develop. Example of type 1 hypersensitivity reactions include allergies to food, pollen, insect stings, skin allergy, dust allergy, animal allergies, etc. Antigens that stimulate allergies are known as allergens. These antigens are common non-microbial environmental antigens. Allergens are mostly proteins. These antigens are harmless to most individuals, but they result in allergy in some individuals. Why this is so is not well understood. Two important factors having major role in the development of allergy are the genetic background of the individual and the environment. It has been found that the relatives of allergic individuals are more likely to have allergies than unrelated people. Families in which both the parents are allergic have a 50% chance of having an allergic child. Environmental factors also contribute to the development of allergies. This factor is explained by scientists as hygiene hypothesis. We acquire immunity by getting exposed to antigen in the environment during our life. If somehow an individual fails to encounter sufficient pathogen in infancy, immune system remains weak and thus it becomes sensitive to normal antigens. Increased hygiene and underexposure to pathogens are important factors that contribute to allergy. Another term for type 1 hypersensitivity reaction is known as atopy reaction. IgE mediated hypersensitivity. The patient with such reactions are known as atopic patients. Type 1 hypersensitivity reactions are either localized or systemic. Localized atopy means the allergic symptoms depend on the location of the affected site. It is generally confined to a particular location, that is, to a specific target tissue or organ. For example, allergic asthma, hay fever, atopic dermatitis, etc. Systemic atopic reaction means the reaction affect the entire body. Extreme systemic reactions are called systemic anaphylaxis. The term anaphylaxis is used for life-threatening reaction. Here, the IgE antibody, instead of providing protection, damage the host. It is often shock-like and fatal state that occurs within minutes of exposure to allergen reaction. The reaction involves airway obstruction and circulatory collapse. Antigens that trigger this type of reaction in susceptible individuals include venom from bees, wasps, and stings, drugs, seafood, and nuts. Hypersensitivity 1 or IgE mediated reaction. In this case, antigen-specific IgE antibodies bind themselves to cells such as the mast cell and basophil. When these antibodies interact with the antigen, degranulation of the cells occur. This degranulation releases inflammatory mediators which further results in the symptoms of the reaction. The production of IgE antibody is the hallmark of the type 1 hypersensitivity. When normal individuals encounter common environmental antigens such as the pollen or any other whatever we mentioned earlier, they do not respond or they produce IgM, IgG or IgE antibodies and clear these antigen. There are no symptoms or damage to the individual, but the individual who are sensitive to these allergen produce high levels of IgE antibody in response to the allergen. The main cells of the immune system involved in the type 1 hypersensitivity reaction are the mast cells, basophils, and T helper cells, cytokines, and chemokines secreted by these cells. These secrete interleukin-2, interleukin-4, 5, 13. They play a major role in the manifestation of these reactions. So as you can see in this slide, when the sensitive or susceptible individual encounters the allergen, the antigen presenting cells take up the allergen and represented them on their receptors. The T cells, that is the T cells receptor, on encountering the antigen, which are showcased by the APC, get activated and they produce the following interleukin, which in turn activates the B cell. The B cell now become the effector cells and produce the plasma cells, that is the antibodies. In this case, that is in the allergen people, it produces more of IgE antibodies and the memory T cells. Now this phase is known as sensitized phase. Here in sensitized phase, the individual do not show any symptoms, but when the individual is again exposed to the same allergen, now immediately they start responding to the allergen because they already have the memory cells present. Immediately, the IgE antibodies bind to the mast cells and the basophil. Here you can see that the IgE antibody bind to the receptors of the mast cells or basophil along with the allergen. This results in the degranulation of the mast cells or the basophil, which releases the histamines, interleukotrienes, prostaglandins, which causes vasodilation, edema, rednesses, itching. Vasodilation means increased diameter of the blood vessels. In this picture, you can see that the blood vessels wherein the cells show permeability, and this the neutrophils or the basophils which are in the blood cells can easily move between the cells and can cause the allergic reaction as mentioned earlier. Treatment of hypersensitivity 1 is the avoidance of known allergen. Localized atopic reaction are treated by antihistamine. Systemic atopic reaction are treated by epinephrine. So just recall what we have spoken. Type 1 hypersensitivity is due to the production of IgE antibodies, and these IgE antibodies bind to the mast cells or the basophil and result in degranulation and production of histamine, which in turn can cause vasodilation and other symptoms. So, any type of allergen can be of two types, localized or systemic. And the first phase is always known as sensitization phase. In sensitization phase, the individual do not show any symptom. On the second encounter of the antigen, which is known as the effector state, this is where the allergic individual shows the symptoms of the allergen.